You may have heard multiple variations of the phrase, trust the science. There is truth to that, but not in the way that people usually take it to mean. Usually you associate the phrase, trust the science, where whatever a scientist says is truth. However, that is an incorrect assumption and not something you should do. Instead, the trust is built through the method of science, rather than the results. Let me explain. What is science? The scientific method is meant to generate knowledge by asking questions, creating an experiment, following it through, and getting results. Based on these results, the original hypothesis is either supported or needs to be changed. What is absolutely integral to science is that knowledge can be edited and changed based on new evidence. In my time in college and working as a research associate, there are things that I have noticed in the academic process that can be a source of error in scientific writings. In this video, I'm going to go over 7 different sources of error that can be found in scientific writings, and then I will go into how you can become a better skeptic and understand what that means. The first is peer review. Now, a peer-reviewed paper will most likely always be more credible than a paper with no one checking it. However, that doesn't mean that the peer review process is flawless. From colleagues who have gone through the peer review process, I've heard that they have noticed that some reviewers will pay attention to their study statistics while others won't. That could generate a problem, as some people may miss a mistake, which could make your study less credible. Peer reviewers are also human beings who have biases and can make errors. This isn't always malicious, but it is just something that everyone is prone to doing. This can affect the validity of your paper if personal biases are entering the peer review process. Another source of error in scientific writings is that some scientists do not have integrity when following the scientific method. People can omit data, change their statistics to look better, won't redo a mistake due to time, or insert their own biases into their study. There could be a moment where the evidence they collect and process doesn't match up with their hypothesis, and instead of changing their own disposition, they say that there must have been a mistake. Now, of course, this is all context dependent. Speaking of context, the next error is the timeline in which a study takes place. Many experiments for undergraduates may take 1 year or less, a master's student has 2 years, and a PhD has 4 to 7 years, of course, depending on what they do, in order to conduct their experiments. In the grand scheme of time, 2 years does not mean much. There can be very interesting information from them, but it doesn't constitute certainty, especially in ecology. Next, at least in ecology, few studies are replicated in the exact same place or with the same methods. Instead, what you usually find is that these older studies are integrated into new studies, but the subjects are different, the environment is different, or it is merged with a different methodology. Again, this isn't due to people cutting corners or being ill-willed. In ecology, the system a study took place in 90 years ago is very different to the one today. Things won't be the same, and it could very well be impossible to do so. While this is completely understandable, there are issues with it. How can you know that the process and the readings are accurate? Another source of error is funding. In class, we were taught to pay attention to who funds certain projects. A good example of this is cigarette companies funding scientific research to ultimately say that smoking is good for you, which it isn't. What is important to note is that this applies to every funding source. Any source of funding may be pushing a certain agenda or narrative that benefits those providing the funding. However, the opposite can also be true. Some funding sources genuinely want to know what is going on, and they may not have the narrative they are trying to present that other funding sources have. You need to be aware and cautious of it all because you just don't know. A mistake I also see in the scientific process that people make is that if their evidence does not show what they expect, by being opposite or particularly insignificant, people won't publish it for various reasons. This is not good, as even non-significant results is still data that is informative. I've touched on this before, but I want to mention it again because it is a large factor in scientific mistakes. Inserting personal biases is not good for creating an accurate picture of what you're trying to study. This is very hard not to do, which is why it can so often be missed. Accidentally inserting your bias and views can alter the data to show something that may not necessarily be true at all. While reading papers, you may also notice how some papers got through the peer review process but don't have a strong base. What I mean is that they don't have a good random sample, they have few replicates, or that their sample size is really small. Now, there can be some very interesting data from these papers, and the scientists who wrote them are aware that their study isn't as strong as it could be. What is good to keep in mind is that these papers don't have a strong base and that there can be more said about that certain topic. So, what am I trying to get at? My point is that scientists can make mistakes and can be wrong. There are scientists who work their entire lives on a topic and still be wrong. You can look at so many past figures who were questioning the world, but we know today were incorrect. Some people got certain areas right, while others did not. Human error is inevitable, and that is okay. Science is about asking questions and figuring out how the world works. It is prone to change based on new evidence, and that is the key. Trust the science is valid. It's the trust you put in the method that brings real results. You can see it in medicine, technology, infrastructure, agriculture, and so much more. Being a healthy skeptic of science is not fully believing everything you hear or read. This doesn't mean that you are ignorant to what scientists say or in denial of science altogether. You are just cautious. It is not a negative stance, but a neutral one. What makes science so viable is the evidence that is gathered from the method to prove an argument is false or not. Evidence is the key that science hinges upon. It is not faith or blind trust. To be a healthy skeptic, you need to look at the evidence yourself and see if something makes sense or not. Don't just take someone's word for it. This ability to be cautious of findings actually pushes people to be accountable, which in turn pushes knowledge further. A skeptical audience needs to be shown proof and is not easily satisfied with claims with no evidence or reasoning. Now, this does mean that you have to get used to one thing: the unknown. It isn't nice or something comfortable, but rather scary. People generally like to know rather than not, which makes sense. However, to truly be able to become a better scientist, it is better to be okay with saying, "I don't know." Compared to the average person, scientists spend a lot more time in school to specialize on specific topics. Scientists gain more knowledge from the longer schooling and has time to go in depth on certain questions. It is okay to look up to them for knowledge that you or the average person doesn't know or have time to figure out. However, as shown with my list above, it does not mean that everything a scientist says or is labeled as science is truthful. Look into it yourself and see if what they are saying bears listening to by looking at their process, their references, and being aware that mistakes can happen. This isn't easy, but it will always be better than placing trust without reason. The real difference between a typical scientist and the average person is that the scientist went to school longer to make a career out of research and in turn has more access to tools to ask certain questions. While it is beneficial for certain experiments, anyone can observe, ask questions, make their own experiment, get results, and analyze it. At the end of the day, a piece of paper doesn't constitute true knowledge or wisdom. It is cultivated by experience, life, and is something everyone can do. Science is a fantastic method that has changed lives throughout the world. What is important to note is that anyone can be a scientist, not just someone who went to college. I encourage you all to be scientists and skeptics in your own lives. Even without the fancy equipment, knowledge can still be attained. Besides, creativity often breeds in limitation. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate all of your support. See you in the next video.